Lunar New Year for everyone. I apologize ahead of time if I cough. I'm actually at home in quarantine, but this is something I felt passionate about doing. I've been a member of the community and a participant of CCACC and a benefactor of CCACC since I was a kid playing volleyball at Tilden, or my kids getting vaccination, my dad through the senior center. So this is something that's near and dear to me. I have grown up here in Montgomery County. I am the supervisor of the Montgomery County Police Electronic Crimes Unit. I'll be speaking in English, and Officer Chen will then do each slide in Chinese. One of my collateral duties in the past, I've been fortunate to have worked with Chief Deputy Max Wee as a crisis negotiator as well. And with that, I will say that this is very topical because your health also includes your safety, and that's something I hope we can address today. So on behalf of Chief Marcus Jones and Captain Stacey Flynn, we're going to talk about the safety presentation for the AAPI community. First thing we want to do is try to address the definition of a hate crime versus a bias incident. So a hate crime is something that has a active criminal incident, and it is not only violence against individuals or groups, but can also be property. Oftentimes what we see is vandalism combined with a bias component. So there needs to be a crime that's been committed, and then that, in terms of the crime, was initiated or perceived by the victim to be perceived because of the hate or bias by the victim involved. So a bias incident could be separate though from a hate crime and may not be necessarily considered criminal in nature. Jimmy?
Hello， 大家好，我是陈警官，蒙郡的陈警官。刚才硕君又讲的第一个 slide， 有这犯罪，这是一个刑事犯罪，另外一个是偏见事件。仇恨犯罪就是一定要在一个犯罪的基础上，加上对种族歧视的这么一个元素，这样才叫做仇恨犯罪。比如说，因为你是亚裔而对你人身攻击，或者因为你是亚裔而对你的车或者对你的房子进行破坏，那样是仇恨犯罪。然后偏见事件就没有犯罪的这么一个元素在里面，就是会对你的，比如说对亚裔说出一些不好听的名字，或者等等等等这些，但是没有犯罪元素在里面，这就叫偏见事件。
So what happens when a hate crime or bias incident is reported to the police? Montgomery County Police will document every allegation of a hate crime or bias and investigate it to determine whether the event is, number one, verified, two, inconclusive, meaning that there's not enough evidence to otherwise prove that it is or is not, or unfounded in that it is not.
然后当市民打电话跟警察局报案说有这么一个仇恨犯罪或者偏见事件的时候，我们警察局会尽全力的去调查每一个这个犯罪的这些元素，看看这个犯罪到底成不成立。所以就会第一个就是如果证据充足，就会让法院去处理。然后第二个就是证据不足，那这样法院可能就对这个案子可能就不会的这么成功的去起诉。然后第三个就是如果证据不足，那就是那是第二个。然后第三个如果就是案件不成立，就是可能一些证据就不充足，那样子可能就是这个案子根本就成立不了。Next.
So in Montgomery County, we have about a little over 1.1 million residents, and of that, 15.6% are Asian American, AAPI. And as you can see here, when you look at the perspective of it, in 2019, there were 5 reported incidents. In 2020, there were 8, and in 2021, there were 16. Of the 16 that occurred in 2021, 2 were vandalism, 2 were actually against Montgomery County police officers while they were arresting a subject. But the majority were actually harassing or verbal assaults. No physical harm occurred to any of the victims in this incident, except for the Montgomery County police officer. And so I know that this is always a palpable fear. We see it in the news, in 世界日报 and things like that, about in Oakland or New York, but we've been very fortunate in Montgomery County. While any one incident is too many, 16 out of 1.1 million residents is what we've faced. And I think part of that increase has been because of more sensitivity to what's happened. Part of it is obviously what's been happening in the last 2 years with COVID. And part of it is, I think, a better understanding of residents to call the police. I know there's always a reluctance from our AAPI community of calling the police. And I would attribute part of that to the increase in numbers.
然后2021年的这个数据有我们蒙郡有超过快100万的这个居民，然后15%是亚裔，就包括中国的、韩国的亚裔的这个群众。然后2019年有5宗这个针对亚裔的事件，2020年有8宗，2021年有16宗。然后大部分都是口头上的这么一个攻击，没有实际上的人身攻击。有2宗就是对市民的这个财产上面的一些破坏，比如说房子啊、车呀。然后有几宗是针对我们这个蒙郡警察的亚裔警察的，在工作时候就对我们的一些攻击。所以说这个事件的每一年的这个增加，也是因为大家对这个亚裔仇恨的这个重视。之前比较少，可能是因为大家不敢去报案，然后导致那个数据没有达到像现在的这个数量这么多。Next.
So as I already stated, why it might be lower, there's often underreporting by Asian Americans to feel comfortable calling the police. I know that's in my own in-laws or my parents. Why that is, I think, is something that's for another topic of discussion. But I want to reassure people here in Montgomery County to call the police. And if you want to remain anonymous, that is also something that is possible. If it's a language barrier issue, as you can see, 我跟 Officer Jimmy 我们2个都会讲中文的。那我们如果没有办法找到会讲语言的沟通的警察呢 we can find, as I was saying in Chinese, we have bilingual officers, but if we don't have one for a language, we also, or one working, we do have a language line to be able to help with language barriers.
然后那个数据这个低呢，就是因为可能一些市民呢，就可能自己觉得报案吧，跟警察打电话，可能觉得不太好，觉得自己心里不舒服，可能会不知道该怎么说。然后，如果你们不会讲英文的话，我们有一些翻译，很多语言的翻译。那个你打电话给911，他们说你要讲什么语言，他们会尽力的去找讲你这个语言的这些警察去帮你处理事情。然后你也可以，如果说你报案的时候你不想说出你的名字，你也可以不用说出你的名字，可以那个无名指的这个去报案。
It is important that the AAPI community, but if you report it to the police. It helps us because we don't always know if there's an issue unless it's communicated to us. And that's important so that we can direct the proper resources to help with the situation. Okay, and I know I'm getting a couple of different questions here in chat, so I'll take most QA at the end. I think that's the format of the CCACC, but South Asians are definitely part of the community. In fact, our Assistant Chief of Investigative Services Bureau is a South Asian, Dinesh Patil. So I hope that kind of answers that question because I've gotten 2 questions about it, one in private, one in public. Go ahead, Jimmy. Officer Chen.
Okay, next slide.
Yeah, we can do that. So in terms of mistrust of police, this is right out of our Montgomery County Police mission statement. We, the Montgomery County Department of Police, in cooperation with communities we serve, will work to enhance community relations and build trust through transparency, accountability, and strong leadership.
然后这个是我们那个警察对群众的一个宗旨。我们这个蒙郡警察会尽全力的去跟群众建立这个之间的信任，然后建立这个透明度，就是让群众知道我们工作都是为了群众，然后会尽量的为你们服务，尽量建立信任。我知道在中国可能对警察这个差异，可能对警察的这个信任度不够，然后很多人来了美国，觉得以为警察可能就跟国内的差不多。但我们想让你们知道，就是我们这边的警察都会尽力调查你们报的案，然后也希望你们能信任我们。
Officer Chen and I both grew up in Montgomery County, and our relatives, our families are here. I went to Huafu and Gaitshen 中文学校 too. So we hope you all understand that we are not just police officers, but we're members of the community. And that's the case for a lot of our police officers, and we do care. So hopefully that helps to alleviate some of the concern. So for language, we do have, as I was saying earlier, interpreting service called a language line. We have 60 AAPI officers with Montgomery County Police, 194 of whom are certified in speaking another language. They have to take a test. And it's probably higher. It's just officers who've elected to be tested to be certified. And we have varying degrees. You can tell probably Officer Chen's Chinese is better than mine. So I am doing the English and he's doing the Chinese.
像我们之前说了，如果你那个语言上面有障碍，你可以那个跟911他们申请说讲中文的或讲你舒服的这个语言，24小时都有。晚上如果像半夜，如果你报案的话，你也可以有这么一个服务，可能需要等的时间会长一点，因为他们要找翻译。我们警察局有60名警察是讲亚裔语言的，就包括韩文、中文等等，总共有194名警察是讲不同语言的，比如说意大利文啊，那些等等其他语言。像我就会讲普通话跟广东话，所以我还是很希望能帮助这个英语上面那个就讲的不太好沟通的人，我也希望能尽力帮你们。
我会讲国语、台语，还有听得懂上海。So you can see of that breakdown number, we have Spanish, Korean, Chinese, Vietnamese, Cantonese, Farsi, Urdu, there's French, there's a lot of other languages. We are all very fortunate as residents of Montgomery County to have a very diverse and representative police department. We're also a large agency to have these kind of resources, and hopefully you all can feel comfortable in utilizing these resources.
然后大家看到了这些，就是我们那190多名警察那个都可以讲的另外一种语言，有西班牙文啊、韩文、中文啊、越南语，其他等等等等。如果你需要帮助，你就跟911那个通信局讲。
So for immigration fears, Montgomery County Police does not ask for immigration status, period. Okay? We provide services to all persons regardless of their status. Let me just repeat, we don't ask people's immigration status. Officer Chen.
我们警察局会给所有人提供服务。你的这个身份，在美国的身份，我们是不在意，我们是不问。只要你有事，你就可以打电话给警察，不要因为你的身份原因而不想报案。
So for calling 911, if it's an emergency, everybody knows, call 911. For non-emergency, the phone number is 301-279-8000. Proof is not required to make a report. Anyone can call. The dispatcher will ask for an address so they know where to send the officer, your name, phone number, so they can call back and questions about what happened. If you don't feel comfortable giving your name or phone number, that's actually also permissible. An officer will be dispatched to speak with you and document the event, and all hate crimes will be investigated.
然后以下这个就是跟大家讲一下怎么样去报案，打给警察，打给911。如果你有人身攻击，你受到威胁，你要打911，这个是一个紧急的一个电话。如果只是一些财产上的一些不太紧急上面的一些案件，你就打301-279-8000这个电话。2个电话都可以让一个警察去您需要的地方去帮助你。只是911这个电话比较紧急，如果他那个速度比较快，报案呢不需要任何的一些证明，你只要有电话打911，你就可以报案。然后等你打通电话以后，我们那个通信人员会问你的地址，这样警察才可以去您需要的那个地方。如果你可以给他的名字或者你电话号码，你也可以不给你的名字或者电话号码。如果你感觉那个不舒服的话，然后他会问你一些问题，为什么要报案？所以你可以告诉这个通讯人员发生了什么事情，这样子那个警察就会有一些资料，就不会去到您需要的地方，也不知道该做什么。所有的仇恨案件都会被调查的。
So the way I see it in terms of personal safety is, what do you do to prevent it? First. Second, what to do during an event, and what to do after the event. So for personal safety, victims can be targeted at any opportunity or for profit, but one of the things that victims can do is be aware of surroundings. Don't be walking around with your eyes on your phone the whole time. Know what's going on around you. Park in well-lit areas. Remember where you park, lock your doors, walk in groups when possible, and trust your instincts. If it doesn't feel safe, then maybe it's telling you something, right? One of the things I learned when I was in the academy was fear can be like fire. A little bit of fire cooks your food, keeps you warm. Too much can burn you. It's like fear. A little bit of fear can tell you that something isn't feeling right. You should probably listen to that, as long as it does not paralyze you.
以下就是我们警察局给大家的一些小小的小提示吧，安全小提示。一般受害者都是被攻击，就是因为他们的就有机可乘嘛，对吧？如果你晚上车里面放了贵重的东西，他们看到了，他们看的是一个机会，他们就会犯这个罪。如果你身上带了一些非常贵重的物品， 被小偷看到，他们也会犯这个罪。所以大家平时要在外面要注意自己的周围，在街上走的时候，不要老看手机，对吧？就多注意一下身旁有没有一些可疑的人物。停车呢，停在一些比较亮的地方，这样对你的车、财产或对你人生也是一个非常重要的一个保护。那么记得你停车停在哪，车门要锁，因为现在我们有很多人都在家里上班，车都在停在外面，因为疫情的缘故，很多车呢没锁门，小偷晚上就去车里面偷东西。然后家里门也是，车库门等等，这些平时大家都注意一下。然后下班呢，大家尽量找多几个同事一起走，人多，这样那些小偷啊或抢劫犯他们会多思一下。We'll go next.
So if you are targeted and it is occurring, avoid confrontation, don't challenge them, try to control your emotions. I know that Chief Deputy Max, I said earlier, we were crisis negotiators. When people are very emotional, they're less rational. So try to be calm and not emotional. And when people are more rational, they make better decisions. If it's a possession, give it to them. Your personal safety is not worth the monetary value of what can be replaced, okay? Nothing you own is worth your life. Call 911, and then we'll talk about self-defense legality in the next slide.
如果有人要对你产生攻击，我们建议你去避免这种正面的冲突，这样对你的人生有保障。我知道很多情况下，特别是这种种族歧视这种犯罪，会激起你心里的怒火，或者想打架、想攻击别人。我们建议你最好就是保持那个冷静，打电话给警察，我们来处理这些事情。如果是有人想偷你身上的东西，这些财产你就给他们。你的生命、你的人身安全是最重要的，没有任何的物品比你的人生、你的生命更贵重。
I'll just quickly answer the two questions for Ms.Julie Yang. Yes, if it happened a few days ago, it can be investigated. It's only bound within the statute of limitations, depending on the type of crime that occurred. In terms of the self-defense, we'll talk about in the next slide. I'll answer that real quick. So within weapons, you need to be permissible within the law for each of those things that has been asked by CCACC. For guns, it would depend on complex set of laws in terms of training, purchasing, permitting for guns. For knives, depends what type of knives to carry in terms of size, in terms of if it's spring-loaded. For whistle device, that's a great idea. That's something everyone can have. If it's pepper spray, that's also permissible. For taser, it is not allowed in DC. So if you were to have it in your purse, for instance, and you went to DC, you would be breaking the law. So you need to be careful of that. But the main thing is you have to think about what you are really prepared to do to fight another person who is ready to harm you. Is it really worth that to protect your property or to give it to them? Okay, and that's something that you as an individual have to answer. I would recommend giving it to them and calling the police. One thing in my 19 years of law enforcement service I have seen often is because there's a language barrier or hesitation to call by the AAPI community, we as police want to help, but sometimes I've seen people call the next day or an hour later. For instance, they'll go back to find some friend who can speak English and then call the police. And it's much harder for the police to be able to assist a person if it's, say, a street robbery, and we can no longer immediately respond to that location to try to apprehend the individual who might still be in the area, because an hour later, that whole scenario changes.
I'll just do the Chinese part.
Yeah.
回答那个几个问题，刚才有几个人问了几个问题。偏见事件，就这个每个人都可以报案。如果仇恨犯罪，我们就会去调查。偏见事件因为没有犯罪这个成分在里面，所以就不会在法庭上是不成立的。就有时候我们也会被，我们做警察的也会被别人说那些不好听的那些名字，但那个不属于犯罪。然后如果大家想 I'm just going to talk about the
Go ahead. No, sorry.
大家想知道平时在外面就可不可以带一些自卫的一些工具，像枪啊、刀啊等等那些，一定要在法律合法的情况下才可以携带。刀可以带那种折开的那种刀，里面不可以有弹簧。可以带那个胡椒喷雾，那些可以带，然后电击枪你也可以带，但是在 DC 是不允许的，那个电击枪。
So what happens if you're not the victim, but you are the bystander, you've witnessed it? Bert's going to go into detail about that, but very quickly, it's the 5 Ds: distract, delegate, document, delay, and direct. I'll keep it short for interest of time.
如果你不是被攻击的这个受害者，如果你是旁观者的话，我们那个有5个 D 是可以去参考一下，等一下会有人更仔细的去讲。
Thank you so much. And I think most of the question in the chat box it's already answered. And we will go into the bystander training soon. But before that, I will give the time. I pass the time to Julie. She's going to have a very brief slides and giving us some perspective from the school. So 我们现在请朱莉杨成华女士给我们稍微讲一下在学校里面看到的一些就是孩子之间的那个 bullying 霸凌这种情况。好，朱莉。
Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Oh, shoot. Do I do something now? You cannot see my slide. Let me open it up again. Okay.
I can see your slide. Yeah.
Okay, good. Wonderful. Now, so glad to be here. I know in the audience, some of you might have students in schools, and they might also experience bullying or harassment or bias statement or intimidation in school. So because we're going to go into later conversation about bystander, here I want to focus on what if your student is the victim of such action. So we are talking about it can be in the form of physical, verbal, non-verbal, social, or cyber. So what it means is it's not only when your student is getting personal, physically harmed, but these situations can be verbal or can be microaggressions, such as making comments or ignore your students in group discussions. You could be constantly question your students to verify their statement. Things like, I have been to that store and never seen it. Oh, I always eat that dish at the cafeteria. It doesn't taste like what you said. Are you sure that's what it tastes like? I did this homework last night. It didn't take me that long. Why does it take you so long? You know, constant comment like that, microaggressions, that can be a form of harassment and bullying. And also nowadays, because our students are spend so much time on internet and on their phone, cybersecurity is a big concern. Actually, it is reported that 30% of students reported that they have experienced some form of cyber bullying. So the numbers are alarming. Now, within the, I would like to share with everyone that if your student report these things to you at home, it's really important that we support our students. So one of the myths we have to challenge is that my students must have done something wrong to provoke the other party. So it's not necessarily, that is not the case. Bullying and harassment can happen to anyone. Okay, so second thing is, if I tell my child to ignore those behaviors, the bullying or the intimidation will go away. And that is another myth. It doesn't go away on its own. It needs to be addressed. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about how to support your student. So always have family conversations at the dinner table. Hear your student out. Understand how they are feeling. Okay, reassure them that this is something that it's not because what they did, but this is something that you need to work together to resolve, need to report to school, need to find support for them in school. So at MCPS, students can always call, whether they are the victim or they're bystander, they can call this 1-833-MD-BE-SAFE number to report an incident. Okay, you can also speak any language, and there will be a translator to help out. So if you are a student, you watch someone being bullied, call this number to say, I'm at this school, I'm at this third floor, someone is being bullied, okay? Or if you are the victim, you can dial this number and say, I'm being bullied, I don't feel safe right now. And someone will follow through with your report. Now, also, MCPS do have a bullying form, okay? You don't have to fill out a bullying form in order to report bullying. You can do it by phone call and by email. However, by filling out the bullying form, it looks like this. It leave a paper trail. It leave a paper trail for school to investigate and to document in case something happened in the future. So it's always to your benefit to fill out the bullying form, okay? And so third thing is, after you report it, report to your student's teacher, report to your student's counselor, report to the principal or assistant principal of the school. And always ask for specific things that you would like to see happen. For example, you would like to understand what happened. You would like school to be able to talk to your student and the other party involved. You would like school to investigate and let you know the outcome of the investigation. And so be specific with your ask. And always, if you are not sure what can be done in the situation or need support from parents who have experienced in these kind of situation, reach out to your PTA, reach out to the community groups, and they will be able to give advice. And in the past, I actually have accompanied students and parents to those meetings with the school and with counselors. And when I feel like more help is needed, I have invited civil rights lawyers to come with us to those meetings. So there are community groups that are willing to help. 所以我用中文讲一讲如果您的孩子在学校里受到了歧视，歧视是可以是有或者霸凌，可以是体力上身体上的侵犯，或者语言上的侵犯，还有可能是在电子通过网络进行的霸凌然后呢，您的孩子呢可能呢会感受到有些是那种我们所说的不明显的霸凌，比如说常常的不包括您的孩子常常的放一些不冷不热的话，常常的您的孩子想回答问题不让他们回答不让他们参与活动或者讨论。那当您的孩子向您反映这些问题的时候，一定要聆听孩子并不是说有一个误区是大家觉得一定是可能是自己的孩子做错了事情才会有被人这样对待。其实霸凌的这种挑衅者，他并不是因为您的孩子做错了事情他才进行侵犯的。另外有时候有一个误区是我们忍一忍这个事情就过去了。有时候忍会更加的使到霸凌者嚣张，可能对你孩子的这个霸凌行为更加会升级。所以遇到这些情况，请大家一定反应，然后一定跟打这个电话，或者跟学校的老师、校长、counselor 反应的时候一定要有很明确清楚的诉求，请学校调查，请学校处理然后看了调查结果之后再进一步的跟进，说如果出现了这个问题，以后学校会采取什么样的措施防止这些情况再次发生。所以呢如果大家觉得自己跟学校打交道吃力， MCPS 有 PCC 叫做 Parent Community Coordinator他们有会说中文的，他们是可以提供帮助您跟学校进行交涉。另外呢，有社区组织也可以帮助你。我自己就曾经帮助过很多家庭去学校里跟学校交流，还有过请过这种民权律师一起去跟学校交涉的这个经验。所以呢如果过后大家有问题我很愿意在 Q&A session 的时候回答。Okay, I will save the rest for Bert to go on to bystander training. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them in the chat or answer them in the Q&A section. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Julie. Julie, you can, with all those contact, if you can put it in the chat, people can just copy and paste and save it.
Okay.
Yeah, and if you can, I can just share the slides on our website so people can go back to it if they want to.
Okay.
Okay, and with that, so my agenda planning time is all off, but I will save all the rest of the time, and Bert would have the Zoom platform now. So let's learn about bystander intervention. 好，我们下一个话题就是我们作为一个旁观者，怎么样可以，尽管我们自己不是这个受害者，不是这个目标攻击的目标，但是我们怎么样可以帮助你看到的状况，你怎么样可以帮到他们？我们来学一学。
Okay, great. Thank you. First of all, can folks hear me? Can I get a thumbs up if folks
Yes.
can hear the audio? Okay, great.
Perfect.
Thanks very much. Okay, I appreciate our time's running a little short, and we want to make sure there's time for Q&A. So this will just be a very quick run through of the bystander awareness training. If folks want to see more, please let us know. Or if you want to go into further detail, also let us know. We're happy to set up a follow-up session if that's what people would like. Okay, great. So as we talked about, the purpose here is to talk about bystander intervention. As our colleagues at the MCPD mentioned, bystander intervention is a type of actions you can take when you see hate or instances of harassment happening to other people. And so the reason bystander training is so important, in a recent poll by an anti-harassment group called Hollaback, 79% of the people they surveyed said that it improves the situation if someone had intervened to stop an incident of harassment. But only 25% of those people said that somebody actually stepped in to help them. And so that's a gap we want to try to help close today.
So yeah, I can translate a little bit in Chinese very quickly.
Please.
Okay, so 刚才不是讲到的是，就是其实就是有一个这个调查哈，79%的人就是认为，就是如果有人他们在受到攻击的时候，有人在旁边帮忙的话，79%的人都觉得这样会很有用，但实际上只有25%的这种情况下会有旁观者去介入去帮忙。
And so really briefly, there are lots of different types of, and the point we want to make is that bystander intervention can work across a lot of different types of harassment you might see. So the first category of harassment you might see, the most obvious and extreme type would be verbal harassment and assault. Verbal harassment meaning language that's threatening, like a racial slur, or telling people they need to go home or go back to their country. Assault would mean an attack on a person's physical, mental, or emotional safety, maybe, or even just the threat of an attack. And this, as our MCPD colleagues have mentioned, is a crime. The second category would be behaviors that create a hostile culture. And these would include using language like China virus, Kung flu, words that allow or even excuse the targeted discrimination of Asian Americans. Third category, we call them microaggressions. Now, these aren't as severe on the face of it, but they still create an environment that makes Asian Americans feel like they don't belong. So one example is being asked that question that I think most of us have heard: where are you from? Where are you really from? And the idea behind this question is suggesting that we are somehow not real Americans, that we are really from someplace else, and that we are not truly part of this country. These behaviors may seem like the kind you want to shrug off, but they're a really great opportunity to intervene because they treat Asian Americans as outsiders, maybe even permanent outsiders, that somehow we are perpetual foreigners and we don't deserve the same level of respect and courtesy that other Americans deserve.
所以很简单，就是有3种情况。第一种就是语言上的这种骚扰和那个行动上的这种攻击。那这种呢，就是刚才警察局的同事都有讲到，就是这种都是可以 report 的。那另外一种呢，就是比较subtle 一点，那就是它有营造一种敌对的这种气氛，比如说有人就 用一些侮辱性的这个词语啊，比如说之前讲的这种空腹啊，中国病毒啊之类的词语来传递一种就不友好的那个氛围。那另外一种呢，就比较更微妙一点，比如说有人就会问你，哎，你是从哪里来的？我讲的是你实际上是从哪里来的？这种就是你能感受得到那种敌意，但是就是用这种言语的表达。
And so bystander intervention could be very powerful and have a very powerful impact. Well, first, by intervening, you can help reduce the harm that the people who are experiencing the hate and harassment might suffer. You can show them that someone has their back. And you are also modeling behavior for other people, encouraging them perhaps to get involved and do the same. And that's really the goal of bystander intervention, to teach us ways to be there for each other. And by doing so, these actions can chip away at the culture that lets harassment persist. So as you've heard from our MCPD colleagues, there are 5 D strategies to bystander intervention. We're going to go into each one of them. The point I want to make here is that these 5 Ds give you a lot of options. There's no one correct way to respond. It's going to be up to you, what you're comfortable with, the circumstances, and honestly, how safe you feel. But the point is that each one of these Ds is designed to take care of the person being harassed. And any action you take, whatever you choose, could be very powerful.
所以就是作为一个旁观者，怎么样去介入，怎么样去帮忙这个情况。那总结起来有 5D 5个 D 的这种战略哈，这个策略。那但是这个没有一个统一的一个具体怎么做但是大家可以学一些对策可以应对这个状况。
The first D is distract. And in short, this strategy involves distracting the harasser or inserting yourself into the situation and help the person being targeted get out of it. So some examples of distractions, you could pretend to be lost. You can walk up and ask for directions or ask for the time, ask for help looking for a lost item. If you're comfortable, what's nice about this strategy, it puts questions to the harasser. It directs their attention away from the person they're targeting and makes them think about your questions, and so they can't focus their energy on the person, their target. Another idea is to draw attention to yourself by accidentally dropping a heavy object, a book, a glass, anything that draws people's attention away, maybe even takes a few minutes of people's time because they need to clean up. Another example, if you have a bottle of water or a drink in your hand, you could even walk by the people who are in conflict and, oops, pretend to spill your drink and maybe even get the harasser to get out of the way so they don't get splashed. One other example is you could pretend you know the person being harassed and go right up to them. You could say, "Hi, I'm so sorry I'm late. Thank you for waiting." Or, "Oh my gosh, Kate, is that you? I haven't seen you in a long time. How are you?" And just try to insert yourself and strike up a conversation. What's nice about this example is that you're creating this zone of safety around the person being harassed. You don't have to talk about what's going on. You're talking about something that's completely unrelated to the harassment or the person who started it, and you are diverting the attention away. In short, there's a lot of ways to create a distraction. So if you feel comfortable with this approach, you can be totally creative.
So 第一个 D 就是那个 distract 就是分散注意力哈，就是把这个情况很紧张的情绪把它分散出来。那比如说就做一些不经意的事情，比如说Bert 刚才提出来的一个例子，就是掉了个什么东西啊，或者是跟这个受害者打个招呼，嘿，很久没有见，你怎么样？就不一定要讨论这个真正发生的这个事情，在现场的时候我们不需要讨论，但是就是有一些 分散注意的方法，能够开始就是把这个情况平缓一点。
The next D strategy is to delegate, and this means getting others to help. Now, who are some people we can ask for help? It could be a person who's in charge of the area we're in. So if you're in a grocery store, it could be the store manager. If you're in a restaurant, it could be the restaurant manager. If you're on a bus, it could be the bus driver. Or if you're on a flight, it could be the flight attendant. Another person you can get involved is the person standing next to you. If you're at a grocery store or you're on a sidewalk, you can turn to them and say, hey, do you see what's going on over there? Maybe we should say something to stop them. So the powerful aspect of delegate is that you're getting other people to get involved in intervening in the harassment. You're showing the harasser that there's power in numbers. It also helps the bystander feel supported, that there are people behind them who are willing to get involved and help them. And also, just as powerfully, the more people you can bring in to help, the more you reinforce the idea to everybody that this kind of hate and harassment are not acceptable.
那第二个 D 就是 delegate， 就是找代表，找一个别的那个有比较高的权力的，就来帮忙这个情况。那这种人有可能是你如果在商店看到这种情况，你可以找商店的这个主管，或者是看旁边的人，如果他就说有更多的人去支持这个受害者，那这个情况就比较更容易去处理，或者是There's power in numbers， 就是越多人去支持，你们就比较更容易的去support 支持这一个受害者。
The third strategy is to document, and this simply means taking a photo or a video of the harassment. And documentation can be really powerful because it creates a record of the harassment that the person experienced. And so there's a number of ways you can document it. You can be pretending to be on your phone or checking your email or playing a game. Some other things you can do. Before you take out your phone and begin to record, you can make sure that someone else is doing something first. In other words, consider delegating, getting someone to join and help the person being harassed, and then document. Some other tips, when you document, we recommend that you hold your phone sideways. So hold it this way instead of this way. That way you get as much footage as you can into the frame. Make sure you stand at a good distance so you can put your safety first, as well as capture as much of what you see going on. And also, just as important, narrate what's going on in the video. So make sure that there is an audio record as well as a video of what's going on. So as you're recording, you could say it's 5:05 p.m. It's February 4th. I'm standing on the corner of Old Georgetown Road and Democracy Boulevard. There is a person yelling at an Asian man and his two kids. And so one last point, it's important to follow the local law when you're recording in public. According to the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union of Maryland, you have the right to capture any image in plain sight in an outdoor public space where you are legally allowed to be present. So meaning if you're out in the street, if you're out in a public area, you can feel free to take pictures and videos without any kind of hesitation. One situation where you need to be more careful about documenting is when you're on private property. So this could be in a person's home or at a grocery store. In general, the property owner sets the rules about taking photos and videos. So if you know that the property owner does not allow you to take photos or videos, they could order you off the property. It is something that you should consider if documenting is the strategy you're choosing. Mm-hmm. Now, please keep in mind, none of this should be considered legal advice. If you're interested in the follow-up sessions where we talk more about your legal right to take photos and videos, please let us know. We want to know how to continue this conversation, but these are just some general tips for you.
好，第三个 D 就是 document 记录，做记录。当然就是有一些技巧，你不能直接就很明目张胆的在记录哈。那你可以就假装在做一些别的事情，比如说你在查电邮啊，或者我经常做的事情就是 selfie 啊，take a picture 啊。那另外就是你在做这个的时候，为了不冒犯那个施害的人哈，你就可能就先要 make sure 你有人已经在做前面的事情，就是找到人在帮忙，比如说报告那个店的管理人员啊，就有人在做这个事情。那你在记录，就是比如说在 take 这个 video 的时候，加一些旁白，再讲一下现在是什么时间地点，你在碰到什么事，你看到的是什么样的状况，加上你的这个描述。那最后一个话题就是说，你是不是随便可以就 take 这个 video 就随便的在录影？那 Bert 刚才讲到，法律上的是允许在公共的地方你可以做，所以可以录影，但是在一些私人的地方，比如说某人的家里啊，或者有些商店，他不希望你在里面去录影的话，你可能就不能做这个事情。那如果大家有兴趣学多一点这方面，到底那个什么情况下录影，或者是怎么样比较合法律的规定，或者关于今天的话题，你想进一步的去商讨的话，在 chat box 里面留言，那我们可以计划下一步我们再做怎么样的这种教育。
The fourth tactic is to delay. Which means wait until the incident is over and then check on the person who's been harassed. And so there are a number of things you can do with this approach. First, you can let them know that what happened wasn't their fault. Reassure them, affirm that they didn't do anything wrong. People who have experienced harassment are sometimes told that they're just imagining it, or they're too soft, or they need to toughen up. So having someone come to them and say, I saw that. Are you okay? That was wrong. That wasn't your fault, can be deeply comforting and validating to them. You can also express your support. I just saw what they did. Are you okay? I'm so sorry that happened to you. That was wrong. Again, immensely comforting and supporting to the person being harassed. Or you could offer support in other ways. You can ask them if they'd like you to stay with them. Just sit with them, talk to them, hold their hand, ask them if they'd like something to eat, if you can bring them some water, or even just ask them how they'd like you to support them. I think the important point about the delay strategy is that bystander intervention doesn't need to be a big heroic action like the kind of heroism you see on television or in the movies. You don't have to swoop in and save the day. It's really about taking care of the person being harassed. And sometimes all it takes is just a small gesture that we can all do.
第四个策略就是延缓反应。那在那个案例发生的时候，你不必就是马上去介入，或者是你在里面要当一个英雄。你可以等到那个情况比较平缓下来的时候，那你就跟这个受害者就是去安慰一下，看看那个情况怎么样，然后就表达一下你对他们的支持，就是很抱歉，我看到刚才的事情，我觉得这样的事情很不好，然后看看这个受害者他需要什么样的帮忙，也许需要一些东西去吃或者喝一点东西，我们不需要做一个英雄，但是可以的时候可以给这个受害者一点安慰，一点支持，这个也是很重要的。
And the last strategy is direct. And direct means to go to the harasser directly and speak up about harassment while it's happening. And so the important points of this strategy are to tell the harasser in a respectful, direct, and honest way that their words or actions are not okay. So you can tell them directly, that's not okay, that's inappropriate, you need to stop, you're being racist, I know you're a better person than that. Responding directly is powerful because it shows that you recognize the behavior is unacceptable and it shouldn't be ignored. And again, going back to the modeling behavior, it also shows other people that and encourages them to speak up if they too believe that this behavior should not be tolerated. Now, if you're not so comfortable being that direct with the harasser, there are other ways to state clearly what's going on. For instance, you could just say, hey, they look uncomfortable. Why don't you leave them alone? Or you could ask them questions. Can you explain what's so funny about that joke? What do you mean when you say the China virus? It's an invitation to the harasser to reflect on what they said and hopefully see that it was harmful.
最后一个 D 是 direct， 就是直接反应。那你可以介入，就说，嘿，你这样讲不太好，你不能这样说。然后或者是可以指出你看到的状况，你看他很受伤，他已经哭了，你不要再这样子。或者是你可以直接向这个施害者问问题，比如说刚才讲到的这个 Chinese virus 中国病毒，你可以问他为什么这么好，有什么好笑的？就为什么你说这个是中国病毒？这样也是一种办法去介入。So are these 5D have any consists? I mean, is it the most recommended? It's the first one, and the 5 is the least recommended.
It's not a priority list. It's more a menu of options. And actually, this gets to the next slide. So the 5Ds are like a menu of steps you can choose, whatever you feel most comfortable doing. You don't have to feel like you have to do any one in any particular order. So it's really on, it's your choice, given, how comfortable you feel, what the situation looks like, and really your own assessment of your safety, which one you feel comfortable doing. And what's also powerful about the 5Ds as a menu is you can combine them, right? You could decide to, as we said before, you could decide to delegate, get people involved, and then document. Or you could document, but if you feel comfortable, you can also direct. You can go up to the harasser and call them out for what they're doing. Mm-hmm. And so in that note, and this gets us to our next to last slide, is it's important. So these are some strategies on how you apply the 5Ds and how you bring them together. So first is to notice the scenario. Is this a situation when you should intervene? Should I get involved? And if so, how? Which of the Ds should I consider? The important point here is to trust your instincts. If it feels wrong for you to intervene, or if you don't feel comfortable, it's totally fine. If you feel that some strategies might be better than others, again, trust that. One way to help you decide whether to get involved or how to get involved is to ask yourself, if I don't act, could the situation get worse? And if the answer to that is yes, well, then you can start thinking about which of the Ds you use. And when you get to that, then that gets to the next step. You can ask yourself, what are your options? Which of the Ds could I do comfortably right now based on the harassment I'm seeing? Is it one of the Ds? Is it a combination? And so this, again, it's up to you to trust your instincts and think about what works best for you. And then thirdly, you have to consider your safety, because that is the most important. Are there risks to yourself? Are there risks to the person being harassed or to others? Is there a low risk option? Again, trust your instincts. If intervening doesn't feel right to you because of what you see, it is totally okay not to intervene. There's no one size fits all situation. It's up to you for you to decide what's right.
Mm-hmm. 所以刚才问了一下1、2、3、4、5种对策是不是有先后的顺序？那 Bert 就解释了一下，没有，就是其实是所有的对策里面都是为你所用的，你看看哪一个比较切合当时的情况，然后你比较舒服，比较有信心可以用，要相信你的那个自己的这个直觉。然后用一个或者用其中的好几个，但是很重要一点就是你需要保证你自己的安全。
Okay, thank you, everyone. Sorry to run a little late, but I hope you've found this helpful. So in conclusion, we just want to emphasize that, we AAPI do not have to live in fear of being targeted for harassment and attacks. And I hope you can see that bystander intervention is a way for us to take control or play a greater role when we see harassment that's going on. And we feel that bystander intervention is really important, in addition to using the resources that our MCPS and our PD colleagues have talked about, because when we individually get involved by using one of these strategies, we can do a part. Maybe it's a small part, but it can have a big impact in breaking the cycle of violence, whether it's against our community or whether it's against other marginalized communities or other communities of color, like our friends and neighbors in the Black community or the Latinx community or others. So hopefully this gives you some food for thought and helps you feel like there are things you can do. And of course, if you're interested in going further into this topic or maybe finding ways to practice this, please let us know.
Thank you. 所以刚才就是所有我们今天的 presentation， 就是我们每一个人其实都有一份力量，有一个声音，越多人介入，或者是越多人勇敢的站出来，我们的社区会更有力量。So one last question. Someone asked, how do you find how do you overcome the fear to get involved, intervene? Because our parents, our wisdom tell us just be quiet. Quiet is gold.
that is a really good question. I think a lot of it is like, the first time, I think everyone remembers the first time they went to the swimming pool or the first time they went to the ocean. And it's scary, but the first time you go in and it looks so big, it looks so deep, you don't have any experience, you're afraid you might drown. I think the important thing to remember is that if you feel comfortable, if you think there's something you can do, then try it, because practice is the best way to overcome the fear, right? It's just like the first time you dip your toe into the swimming pool and you think, oh, it's not as cold as I thought it would be, or, oh, the water's not as deep as I thought it would be. Hey, I feel a little bit more comfortable. And, getting into the pool is so important. So if you feel comfortable, if it doesn't feel dangerous to you, then, we'll just encourage you to try it out.
Yes, thank you so much. And our audience just give us feedback. This is very useful, and the bystander training is so useful. And I was asking, Bert, can I just put the slides on our website, and we can share with our audience. And also our friends come from outside of the Chinese community. If you want to connect with all the presenter today, I'm happy to connect you. So I just put my email on the chat box. So I'm happy to connect everybody. And if you need to do a similar seminar in your community, the more the better, right? So I'm happy to do the connection.
And one little plug, if I may. Last year, Julie and I coordinated a webinar just to talk about bystander intervention. And one thing we did with the extra time is that we went through some practice scenarios. So different levels of harassment, from the most benign to the most extreme. And so it was really helpful. And so that is one thing we're happy to do if there's interest.
So if you are interested in hosting that in your community or in your circle of friends, do reach out to Kate at CCACC Pan Asia Volunteer Health Clinic. She will connect you with us, and we are happy to help.
All right. So once again, I put my email out there, and we are happy to be the media to connect everybody and give out the very important information. And I am sure we are lucky to have 2 officers speak Chinese, and I'm sure that we will have a lot of other language, just what is shown on the slideshow. So if you want to do one in your community, we surely can do it. So.
Before we leave, there was a question in the chat asked by Mr. Muhammad Sadiq. he asked the data that the MCPD share about the 16 cases of hate toward Asian Americans. Does that include our South Asian communities, populations?
Yes.
Okay, so that's good to know. So it's all inclusive for everyone.
Yes. I would say, although it still sounds small number, but you see the trend is on the rise. So let's stop that trend. Let's.
Actually,
Mhm.
in my family, we experienced it and we actually did not report it because we were so flustered at the time, and then we didn't suffer bodily physical injury, so we didn't report it. But now looking back, we all wish we had.
Yeah.
Reported it.
I think it takes some practice because like when you are in the scene in the scenario, it's hard to like, it's not in our gene, right? Our gene is run, but so we all can practice a little bit. I think today's 5D is really super helpful. And I mean, recently I've been hearing a lot of like cases around me, people around me telling me what they experience. And I would say, unfortunately, they either don't know where to report, and they don't know that it's actually reportable. So the more conversation like this, it's the more, I mean, helpful. All right, with that, it's around 5:30, and it's a valuable Friday afternoon time. We all should get back home and safely and sound and enjoy the rest of the week, and it's the beginning of the weekend. And thank you everyone for joining, especially the MCPD team. I know you're super busy around this time. Thank you for making the time. And thank you, Julie.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Kate, and everybody.
Thank you. See you.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a good evening. Have a good weekend.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye 了。
Bye.
啊？啊？